Why aren't you trembling, human? Her voice echoed across the snow-covered ridge, like the cry of a goddess betrayed. The beast beneath her, an enormous, white-furred predator with glowing eyes and teeth like shattered ice, growled low, the sound vibrating the very air. Yet Alexander didn't blink. His hands were bound behind him, his face bloodied, his coat torn. But his gaze? Steady. Unafraid. Because I don't fear something that's just pretending to be monstrous, he said calmly. The alien woman narrowed her violet eyes. Mary. That was the name the translator chip offered, but nothing about her seemed gentle enough for it. Armor gleamed across her perfect form, her long purple hair whipped by the wind like a living banner. She leaned forward in the saddle of the beast. One word from me, and this creature will tear you apart. Then why haven't you said it? For the first time in cycles, Mary hesitated. This human was either incredibly stupid or terrifyingly brave. And in that moment, she realized she needed to know which one. Snow fell softly, blanketing the mountain range in a deceptive peace. The icy world of Zephyra 9 was no place for warmth or humans. Yet here one stood, a scarred figure surrounded by armored guards and the deafening silence of tension. Alexander had come to this frozen world as part of a diplomatic envoy, but the mission had gone to hell within hours. Their ship shot down, most of his team scattered or dead. While trying to guide a frightened alien child to safety, he was captured. He hadn't resisted. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was brought before the Ice Sovereign herself, Mary of the Ninth Fong. She looked nothing like the horror stories Earth's broadcasts described. She was beautiful, powerful, regal, but terrifying, like a warrior queen carved from frost and starlight. And now, mounted atop a living legend, a snow beast bred for war, she stared down at him with contempt. I don't understand your kind, she said coldly. Weak bodies, short lives, and yet you walk into my territory like you carry the sun in your chest. Alexander smiled despite the sting in his lip. Maybe because you've never seen how bright humans burn when cornered. That made her pause. Mary's world had been one of dominance, hierarchy, and fear. Her people respected strength and saw empathy as a flaw. Yet Alexander's defiance wasn't aggression, it was conviction. He didn't threaten, didn't grovel. He simply stood there, daring her to understand him. The beast growled again, sensing its mistress's uncertainty. Mary clenched her fist. What were you doing with that child? She asked. Helping her find shelter, he answered simply. She was alone. Mary narrowed her eyes. A ploy? Or are all humans so pathetically sentimental? Alexander tilted his head. We call it compassion. And that is what you think will save you? No, he said. That's what makes me worth saving. It struck something deep in her, a memory perhaps. She turned her head sharply. Take him to the ice cages. If he freezes tonight, so be it. As the guards dragged him away, Alexander caught one last glimpse of her. Not of the warrior, not of the monarch, but of something underneath. Someone watching him not with hatred, but curiosity. That night, as the cold crept into his bones and the alien stars wheeled above, Alexander didn't wonder whether he'd survive. He wondered what kind of world could make someone like Mary so afraid of kindness. And Mary, from her chamber, found herself staring out into the storm, asking a question she never thought she'd ask about a human. Why didn't he tremble? The ice cages were not designed for survival. They were punishments, an open-air prison carved into the mountain cliffs, where the wind screamed like a dying beast and the cold gnawed at every exposed inch of flesh. The Zephyrians didn't execute prisoners directly. The cold did it for them. Alexander sat on the frozen stone, hands still bound, breath coming in slow, visible clouds. Every inch of his body ached, but his mind remained sharp. He wasn't alone in that cell. A pair of yellow eyes gleamed in the adjacent cage. Another prisoner. Not human. A scaled creature with long arms and flickering gills. They say you mocked the Ice Queen, the alien rasped. I didn't mock, Alexander replied. Just didn't tremble. The alien chuckled. Then you're either a fool or already frozen inside. Alexander leaned his head back, exhaling. I've survived worse. And she's not what they say. The alien snorted. Careful. Talk like that gets you killed here. But Alexander wasn't afraid of death. He'd been a soldier once. Lost comrades. Lost family. What he feared now was the possibility that he might not understand the woman riding that beast. And if he was right, if there was something more human in Mary, then he wasn't done yet. The next morning, the cage opened without warning. 2 armored guards yanked him out, dragging him through icy tunnels carved beneath the fortress. They didn't speak, but their movements were rougher than necessary. At the end of the corridor, great double doors opened into a warm chamber lit by blue fire. The contrast hit him like a punch. And there she was. Mary stood at a table, armor removed, wearing a regal robe that shimmered like winter light. Her long violet hair flowed freely, a few strands falling across her cheek. She didn't look up as he was brought in. You survived the cages, she said flatly. Alexander didn't answer. Tell me, she continued, do all humans disobey authority this boldly? I wasn't disobeying, he said. I just didn't fear you. She turned sharply toward him, stepping close. Then you're a fool. Her breath was warmer than he expected. Her eyes, those brilliant alien irises, scanned his face as if searching for something buried deep. Then she gestured to the guards. They exited, leaving them alone. She walked in slow circles around him. Do you know what your kind is to us? We call you Ashborn. Fragile. Unworthy of combat. Creatures who let emotions lead instead of reason. Alexander met her gaze. And yet you keep me alive. Mary frowned, her voice low. Because there's something about you I don't understand. I've broken warriors, princes, assassins. But not you. Why? Alexander inhaled deeply. Because I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to understand. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, without warning, she called out one word in her native tongue. A sound like a blade scraping ice. A growl answered. The wall at the far end of the chamber parted, and the beast entered. Her mount, the snow lion with glowing eyes, padded forward, its gaze locked on Alexander. It bared its teeth, each fang as long as his forearm. Mary stepped back. One command, and it rips you apart. Alexander didn't move. The beast snarled louder, lowering its head, ready to pounce. But then it stopped. It tilted its head, sniffed the air, and then, slowly, astonishingly, it walked to Alexander and sat beside him, brushing against his side like an oversized cat. Mary's eyes widened. No, that's not possible. Alexander looked at the creature, then at her. Seems your pet disagrees with you. She stepped forward, tense. These beasts are bred to obey only the dominant mind, the warrior soul. They do not kneel for prey. Alexander gave a half smile. Maybe it sees something you don't. The moment stretched, thick with tension. And then laughter. Short, bitter, disbelieving laughter. Mary shook her head, then turned and sat on the fur-draped bench beside the fire. What are you really, Alexander? A spy? A manipulator? I'm a human, he replied, approaching slowly. And I think you're afraid. Her smile faded. Of what? That if you get close to someone like me, you'll stop seeing humans as lesser. Silence. Then, barely a whisper, get out. He hesitated, but the snow lion growled softly, protectively, nudging him back. That night, she summoned him again. This time not to test, but to talk. They stood in the palace's open dome, gazing at the alien sky. Twin moons hung low, casting silver light over the mountain peaks. I was raised to see emotions as chains, she said, her voice softer than before. Weaknesses to be cut off. My mother ruled without love. My father was devoured by his own pet when he showed mercy. Alexander stood beside her, silent. I lead armies, she continued. I've conquered entire tribes. Yet here you are unarmed, and I can't decide whether to destroy you or protect you. He looked at her, and in that moment, he didn't see a queen. He saw a woman trapped in a fortress of her own making. "I don't need protection," he said. "I just want truth. And maybe something real." She turned, almost trembling, but covered it with a sharp breath. "You speak like feelings are weapons." "They are," he replied. "But they don't destroy. They change things." For the first time, she didn't argue. She just looked at him and whispered, "Then let's see what changes." But change rarely comes without challenge. The next day, an emissary from the Zephyrian Warlord Council arrived. Word had spread of the human's survival, and Mary's hesitation. "You dishonor your bloodline," the emissary spat. "You let a worm breathe your air." Mary stood before the council chamber, Alexander beside her. "I do not let him live because I'm weak," she said boldly. "I let him live because he matters." The emissary scoffed. "If he matters so much, then let him face the trial." She stiffened. The trial was a sacred combat rite. Not a battle of blades, but of wills. A mental duel, psychically bonded to their beasts. No human had ever survived it. She looked at Alexander. "If you do this, you could die." He met her eyes. "Or I could prove I'm not what they think." Mary swallowed hard. "You don't have to." "But I want to," he said. "Not to prove myself to them, but to you." Something stirred in her heart, something unfamiliar. Fear. Not of him, but for him. The snow lion walked to Alexander's side on its own, glowing eyes flicking with intensity. Mary whispered something in her language, an ancient phrase that meant, "May the bond guide you." And as Alexander walked toward the trial arena, she finally understood. He was no ordinary man. He was the storm she never saw coming. The arena was carved directly into the mountainside, a vast circular pit surrounded by jagged cliffs and ancient monolithic statues of past Zephyrian rulers. Spectators gathered in silence, their breath forming clouds in the bitter air, their eyes fixed on the human who dared walk into the sacred place of challenge. Alexander stepped into the ring. He wore no armor, only a fur-lined cloak given to him by Mary. The snow lion, whom the Zephyrians called Corax, padded behind him, its presence as steady as a mountain. Across the arena, his challenger stood, General Vokrin, a veteran of 100 battles, his own bonded beast a black-scaled raptor with 6 crimson eyes and claws that could split stone. The crowd rumbled with anticipation. To them, this was not just spectacle, it was judgment. Mary stood at the highest ledge, her face unreadable, but her hands clutched the railing with quiet tension. She had authorized this. Now, she couldn't undo it. A horn blared. The trial began. The moment the sound faded, both beasts lunged, not at each other, but at their own partners. That was the first step of the bond test, surviving the reckoning. Alexander didn't flinch as Corax roared and leaped toward him, jaws wide. He stood still, eyes locked on the creature's glowing blue gaze. At the last instant, he raised one hand, not in defense, but surrender. Corax stopped midair. The beast landed gently in front of him, growling low, then bowed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vokrin wasn't so lucky. His raptor slashed his shoulder before obeying his mental push. Blood spilled into the snow. Mary's lips parted slightly. The bond wasn't just real, it was growing. Now came the merge. A psychic tether formed between each warrior and their beast, linking heartbeats, instincts, and thoughts. For Zephyrians who trained from birth, this was second nature. For a human? Unheard of. Alexander's breath hitched as the connection pulsed through his skull like molten fire. For a moment, he saw through Corax's eyes, the endless sensory input of smells, motion, even sound frequencies far beyond human range. He staggered, nearly collapsing. But he didn't. He adapted. He synchronized. Within moments, Corax began to move with him as if they shared one mind, dashing left when he leaned, lowering its head when he braced. They weren't rider and mount anymore. They were one. Vokrin charged. What followed was not a battle, it was a symphony of chaos. The black raptor moved like shadow incarnate, spinning and leaping with surgical strikes. Vokran launched psychic waves meant to tear into Alexander's untrained mind. But Korx shielded him, roaring back with mind pulses that stunned even the elders watching. Alexander rolled, dodged, then lunged, not with brute strength but timing. Korx followed, sweeping the raptor's legs out from beneath it in a single, fluid motion. Mary's breath caught, not because Alexander was winning but because he was doing it with grace. Like he'd belonged to their world all along. The end came when Alexander raised his hand, not to strike, but to stop. "Enough," he yelled, voice echoing through the ice cliffs. Vokran, bloodied and bruised, lay beneath his own beast, defeated not by raw power, but the choice not to kill. The crowd was silent. And then, slowly, they began to kneel. Not out of fear, but respect. Later that night, the palace was alive with whispers. Mary walked the halls alone, cloaked in thought. She passed courtrooms, armories, sanctums of power, but none of them made her feel safe. Only one person did now. She entered the chamber where Alexander sat, staring into the hearth. "I thought you'd be resting," she said softly. He smiled without looking. "Too much fire in my bones." She stepped closer. "You could have finished him."
"Why didn't you?"
"Because winning by death is easy," he replied. "But earning peace? That's harder." Mary sat beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, she reached out, slowly, and touched his hand. It was the first time she had willingly touched another without formality or force. His skin was warm.
"Real."
"I've spent my life fearing weakness," she admitted. "But with you, I fear feeling." Alexander turned to her. "Then feel it anyway." She didn't kiss him. Not yet. But their foreheads touched, and in that closeness, a bond stronger than any beast's was quietly forged.
The peace didn't last.
3 days later, a warship from the Zephyrian sovereign landed on the outer ridge. The High Matron, Mary's aunt and most feared member of the ruling bloodline, had come. With her came chains of gold, rituals of purity, and the final decree. "You will choose," the matron hissed before the court. "This human or your crown." Mary's spine straightened. "You gave me the throne to rule, not to be your puppet." The matron sneered. "You disgrace your blood." The trial was a mockery. His survival was sorcery, not strength. Alexander stood beside Mary now, not behind her. "I don't need your approval," he said firmly. "I didn't come to take your empire. I came because she let me in." The matron raised her hand, and 4 elite guards surged forward. Korx roared, leaping to Alexander's side. The air turned electric with tension. But Mary raised her hand too. "Stand down," she ordered, not to her guards, but to the matron. "I choose," she said, voice ringing like steel over the court. "I choose him." The chamber erupted in uproar. Warriors unsheathed blades. Ministers shouted. The matron stepped forward. But Korx blocked her path, teeth bared. Mary walked forward, face unreadable. "The old ways die with you," she said coldly. "I am not your heir. I am something new." With a whispered command in her mother tongue, she dismissed the council. The guards obeyed her. The matron, defeated not in battle but in authority, turned away. That night, Mary and Alexander stood beneath the twin moons once more. "I gave up everything," she whispered. He smiled. "Then let's build something better." And this time, she did kiss him. Not as a queen, but as a woman who had finally chosen her own fate. The wind howled outside the mountain palace, as if echoing the storm left behind. Snow swirled across the battlements, painting everything in white, except for the torchlit corridor where 2 figures walked, side by side. Mary no longer wore the ceremonial armor of her station. She had shed the gold and obsidian plating, the crown forged from starlight ore, and the legacy of her bloodline. Now she wore only a dark cloak, simple leathers beneath, and a crystal band on her wrist, carved not from royal gems, but a shard taken from Korx's first shed fong. A symbol not of power, but of choice. Alexander walked beside her, Korx trailing with silent steps. The snow lion's fur blended into the blizzard outside, glowing blue eyes watching all who passed. They entered the chamber of the Void Gate, the ancient portal used only in times of dire need. It shimmered with unstable energy, casting reflections of infinite worlds in its surface. Alexander looked at her. "You're sure about this?" Mary nodded. "If we stay, war will follow. The matron still has influence. But if we leave, we forge our own path, on your world or anywhere else." A part of Alexander hesitated. Earth had never seen beings like her, or beasts like Corax. How would humanity respond? With fear or wonder? He looked into her eyes. "We'll find out, together." They stepped toward the gate, and stopped. A figure emerged from the shadows. One of the Zephyrian elders. He was old, with long silver braids and robes that shimmered like frost. His name was Elmeros, one of the few who had never raised his voice during the trial or the court battle. "I would speak," he said. Mary raised her brow. "Speak then." Elmeros bowed. "We have seen many rulers. None dared defy tradition for love. You did. And in doing so, you gave us hope. Hope that perhaps we do not need to rule through fear." He stepped forward and offered her a small vial. "This contains fragments of your mother's memories. She, too, once questioned the old ways. Perhaps now, with your bond, you'll understand why she chose exile over throne." Mary took it, holding the vial with trembling fingers. She had never spoken of her mother. Never dared. "Thank you," she whispered. Elmeros stepped back. "Go in peace. And should you return, let it be as a symbol, not a sword." The gate shimmered. The trio, woman, human, and beast, stepped through and vanished. The Earth they arrived on was not as Alexander had left it. Years had passed faster in Zephyrian time. The war he once fled was over, but so too were many things. His home was now overgrown ruins. His people scattered. But there were still settlements, still cities that thrived. And in the highlands of New Allenridge, he built a home. With his hands, he carved stone from mountain faces. Mary shaped metal with Zephyrian techniques, blending alien and human crafts. Corax, ever watchful, cleared the forests of dangers and protected the growing village that began to form. It started with 5 families, then 10, then hundreds. They called the place Virelia, a city without kings, queens, or castes, where humans and alien refugees from other fallen gates lived together. And they called Mary Starlight Walker, a myth reborn. Alexander was no ruler. He was a builder, a father, a protector. They were no longer soldier and princess. They were creators of something new. One night, as the stars shimmered above the wooden tower where they now slept, Mary woke to a soft sound. She stepped outside. Corax sat in silence, gazing toward the sky. Above them, a streak of fire crossed the night, another gate collapsing in a distant system. A world lost. She sat beside the beast. "How many more will fall?" she whispered. Corax rumbled low. She sighed. "We escaped one empire, but the universe is bleeding." Behind her, Alexander appeared, wrapping a cloak over her shoulders. "We can't save everyone," he said gently, "but we can show them what's possible." Mary looked into his eyes. "Then maybe we start with the children." He blinked. "Children?" She smiled and placed his hand over her stomach. Years passed, and in the legend of Virelia, people spoke of the child born with her father's eyes and her mother's silver blood. A child who could speak to beasts, walk through dreamscapes, and calm even the fiercest minds with a whisper. She rode Corax's cub, a smaller snow lion named Noctra, and danced through the forest, unaware that she was the bridge between 2 worlds. And beyond Earth, in the deep stars, whispers grew. Of a city hidden in blue mountains. Of a queen who gave up everything for love. Of a human who made the wild obey not through fear, but kindness. And of a place where the old ways died, so something better could live.